Hi, everybody. Welcome to Atlanta Inno's virtual State of Innovation in Artificial Intelligence. Really appreciate you being here and can't wait to get started. Today, we'll be exploring what's next in the industry and how local pillars and innovators are currently leveraging this technology and approaching its potential. For anyone unfamiliar with us, Atlanta Inno, what we do, Inno is part of a growing network of sites. We're currently in 14 markets, and we're committed to covering and connecting local technology, startups, growth, and innovation. We're part of the American City Business Journals Network, which makes us a sister site to the prestigious Atlanta Business Chronicle. We're so glad to have you all here today. We love to know, is this anybody's first Inno event? If it is, a poll is going to be launching on the right. We love to see new faces and old faces, so let us know if this is your first or if you're returning. Atlanta Inno covers the local ecosystem via daily stories, daily newsletter, and quarterly events, virtual for now. You can check us out at atlantainno.com to see what we're all about and sign up for The Beat, our core newsletter. The Beat is the best way to stay plugged into everything that's impacting the local innovation economy. In it, you'll get the local tech and startup news you need, analysis you won't find anywhere else, info on upcoming events, and cool job openings, and much, much more, all in a fun conversational manner. If you're looking to stay plugged into or abreast of the Atlanta ecosystem, start with The Beat, start with Atlanta Inno. Before we get started, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Accenture. Without them, this would not be possible. And of course, thank you to our showcase companies and to terrific panelists for sharing their stories and insights into AI with us today. Now, let's get to today's event. Our State of Innovation in AI is anchored by a panel featuring CEOs and executives of some of the city's top pillar companies and fastest growing startups. Before we dive into that discussion, we did want to start off with a showcase of Atlanta startups and organizations that have built their business models around AI and are harnessing the technology in an innovative way to drive business and customer retention. Think of it as the panel is the main course, but the main course is better if you get started. So we've seen with a lot of our virtual events is that by introducing some of these early stage exciting companies that are leveraging this technology, it's a great way to onboard into the panel discussion. So the showcase that we're going, so the folks that we're going to be hearing from the showcase are Nancy Rothman, the VP of Marketing with Sideqik, Mitch Hughes, President and CEO with ViZZ, Manish Singh, COO with Oversight, and Arjun Devarajan with Toucan AI. We're going to go in that order. So again, once we get to the panel, please, you can submit questions via your panel, via your portal to the right. And let's begin with the showcase. So Nancy, take it away.
There we go. Can you guys hear me now?
All good.
Awesome. All right, well, I am Nancy and I am from Sideqik. We are an influencer marketing company here in Atlanta. We've been around since 2012, but we really picked up our stride in influencer marketing over the last 3 or 4 years. We work with a lot of really great brands like Under Armour, Coca-Cola, a lot of like HyperX is another technology company that we work with. And what we do is our platform helps brands connect with their online community on various social networks through influencers. Influencer is a huge industry that has blown up a lot in the recent years. And our platform uses AI and machine learning to help pair those brands with different influencers and then measure their overall efficiency. So what I will do is share a couple of screens to give you an idea of how our platform works. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So we have a discovery engine, and this is really where our AI kicks in. We have over 23 million influencer profiles across, I think, more than 10 social networks now. We actually just added in TikTok, which is the talk of the town lately. So here you have a couple of screens of the data that we're able to aggregate and show for different influencers and partners that brands might want to work with. We're also showing audience demographics to help brands better understand which influencers will align with their audience and who they're trying to reach. We also have engagement tools to help influencers and brands really activate their audiences in addition to spreading awareness. So we have giveaways, user-generated content contests, promotions, all kinds of fun things here. Payments, contracts, things like that. We also operate as a CRM for influencer activity. Messaging, kind of a one-stop shop for all influencer activity and managing your relationships with those different partners that you may be working with. And we are global. We have a lot of customers through every region of the world. So we have different languages incorporated as well. So you can get influencers for any market. Reporting and showing ROI, this is probably the biggest challenge that a lot of brands have when it comes to influencer marketing. So what we're able to do is aggregate a lot of the social data, integrate in with a lot of other platforms and other tech stacks, and create a dashboard that really shows the effectiveness of influencer marketing. I think that is up on my time. So I will pass it on to the next person.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Really appreciate that. Next up is Mitch Hughes with ViZZ. And just a reminder that our showcase panelists are going to be joining us during the Q&A portion. So if you have any question for our showcase members, please let that know via the question. I'm going to take the panelist questions, filter through the panel, but we'll also bring those questions back during the Q&A as well. So if you want to learn more about Sideqik, ViZZ, Oversight, Toucan, hit me up via the questions, and we're going to bring that up at the end. Thanks so much. And Mitch, take it away.
All right. Well, it's probably most people on this call know the artificial intelligence market is booming. There's estimates it'll exceed $191 billion by 2024 to put things in perspective, and no industry is untouched by AI. We're all still coming to realize the scope of what it can do. So for the AEC industry, architects, engineers, and construction, it could not be truer. An industry that needs it. Historically, this marketplace has not been able to understand the full scope of their property's life cycle due to a few obstacles. Namely, they have incomplete historical information, understanding of the saved information, its location, places, programs are all varied, and there's an inability to collaborate and communicate in real time with the other players involved. So with ViZZ, all the AEC players are provided with a single source of truth, or a common playbook that allows for a time to be spent more productively, as well as complete understanding of a building before, during, and after construction. So ViZZ pairs 3D visualization and AI to enable users to collaborate and securely track and share changes that occur throughout a building cycle, and in fact, its entire life cycle, as well as its contents and its users and equipment. Our software aids by lowering the cost and helps owners attract and stay connected with architects, contractors, and tenants through AI. And ViZZ combines the power of AI with digital twin technology, which is a duplication of anything in the real world, with the digital realm of computers. Allows us to immerse ourselves in these digital twins where data and information, visuals, and intelligence are all combined into a useful and easily accessible tool that creates significant opportunities for efficiencies in the management process. And AI makes the digital twin a more powerful and personal experience, creating an interaction that's tailored to our needs in near real time, taking advantage of learned behavior to offer better user experiences. With the digital twins now offer real-time, attainable value to people, businesses, at home and at work. It isn't just for the office, it actually carries into our homes and our communities. So at ViZZ, we're harnessing that power of AI and digital twins to make a more connected and informed business, community, lives where we live, work, and play. That's our story.
Thanks so much, Mitch. Really appreciate that. All right, next up, we are going to kick it to Manish Singh, the COO with Oversight. Manish, take it away.
Sounds good. Just go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Manish Singh, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Oversight Systems. For those of you not familiar with Oversight, we provide an AI-based risk mitigation and audit platform that is leveraged by large enterprises to essentially transform the way they approach risk and compliance programs within their enterprise finance functions, largely focused on spend or disbursement areas of their finance functions. So traditionally, if you were to ask, why our customers are our customers, I think it would come down to sort of three primary outcomes that they're looking to achieve for themselves with a solution like Oversight. It comes down to mitigating risk, managing quality, and more importantly, elevating the role of the people involved in accomplishing this job within their business processes. By mitigating risk, what I mean by that is essentially focusing on preventing cash leakage, increasing compliance. Managing quality is all about improving the efficiency of the business process as well as guiding business decisions on a day-to-day operational basis. And then lastly, elevating the role of the people involved in the process has to do with enabling a better job with essentially less effort. Now, it's fair to say that most large organizations are already doing something when it comes to managing risk within their business processes, and a large number of them traditionally have relied upon what functionality they have from their source ERP systems, or they do some kind of sample-based audits, or they leverage some ad hoc reporting tools, even Excel in a lot of cases. But the challenge is that these existing current state controls are no way designed to identify risk, and instead what they do is just create a pile of transactions that somebody has to then comb through to find the needle from the haystack. And that largely has to do with the fact that these systems and processes are unable to accurately look for what I would call judgments or business decisions that individuals or employees are applying within the organization that exist in gray areas and get reflected in business transactions. So in a lot of cases, you're not able to see the forest from the trees. You can't see the patterns of risk, for example, with the traditional approaches that these organizations are using. And in most cases, they tend to be retrospective in nature and passive in a sense that does not allow you to take action at the right time in the right place. So let's talk about what a future state may look like with a solution like Oversight. Essentially, Oversight is built on an artificial intelligence framework called evidential reasoning. It layers on top of all the source systems and the business processes that an organization is executing against, and it's acting much like a virtual detective. So by evidential reasoning, I mean we're looking for a lot of different pieces of what I call weighted evidence or clues within the data to identify risk rank conclusions that essentially are then being served up in the form of cases for compliance teams, for audit teams to review and research and take action upon, right? So we are disrupting the way people have traditionally gone about managing risk and compliance, and focusing all of their efforts now, instead of analyzing data, to mainly making decisions and taking action on the alerts that Oversight has identified. So no more silos when it comes to processing for potential risk or breakdowns, and Oversight is automating the process for business process quality, compliance, and fraud type findings in a way that allows these individuals or stakeholder groups to communicate, collaborate, to understand what happened, why did it happen, and most importantly, to make sure that it does not, the issues don't happen going forward. So for those of you, again, not familiar with Oversight, let me introduce ourselves. So we are the leader in mitigating risk and optimizing spend for large organizations. We support half of the Fortune 100 and hundreds of the Fortune 2000 as our customers today. In total, we are analyzing spend for nearly 10 million individuals in over 200 countries. And across our customer base, we are monitoring close to $1 trillion of transactions on an annual basis. Again, all with the mission of creating those better outcomes for our customers with less effort, and serving as that sort of single lens into an organization's financial risk. I'm proud to say Oversight was recently recognized as one of the top 10 most innovative companies in Georgia by the Technology Association of Georgia, and also recently named as one of the fastest growing companies in Atlanta by the Atlanta Business Chronicle as part of their 2020 Pacesetter Awards. So again, thank you for this opportunity, and happy to connect with any of you at any time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's a great segue to just remind folks that we're going to have a recap on the site, atlantainno.com, tomorrow, where if you miss something or want to learn more, it's going to be in there. And then also, that's a role that Atlanta Inno aims to play in this community, is to be a connector. So if you hear or see anything during this event that you want to learn more about or touch into, reach out to us at atlantainfo@americaninno.com, and we'll shoot to facilitate that connection. Again, you guys are doing amazing jobs across every industry in this community. Our job is to help connect things to help you move forward. So with that, our last showcase member, we have Arjun Devarajan, the CEO and co-founder with Toucan AI. And Arjun, take it away.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for the time. This is Arjun from Toucan AI, and basically we are a zero setup AI salesperson for e-commerce. So I'm going to show a quick video about what we do.
Vacation and barbecue, small talking and nothing to do. You keep it locked in a shopping cart, a bourgeois Shangri-La. Got feeling that I don't belong, got feeling that I shouldn't be here. You can't stand another single day, I gotta get away. Got a feeling that I don't belong, got a feeling that I shouldn't be here. It's been another single day.
So I think that video might have been a little hard to see on the screen, but basically, Toucan AI is a platform that lets e-commerce companies, primarily small e-commerce companies who are based on Shopify, handle sales conversations and help guide their shoppers to the right products. So basically, we act as an AI sales bot that sits on their website and helps make them more sales. We're currently being used by over 200 Shopify stores, and we've seen an average order increase of about 25% across all these stores. And yeah, basically the way we use AI is by taking all the information that's on these websites, so all their product information and anything to do with their site as a whole, and making it so that our system is able to immediately answer questions that shoppers have. So answer questions about products or answer questions about the company, or just help guide them to what they're looking for, much like a real salesperson would do in a real retail store in physical real life. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you're interested in talking more about AI, I'd love to talk more. You can feel free to reach out at arjun@toucanai.com. That's ARJUN and Toucan AI is spelled down there. Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Arjun, and thank you to all of our showcase participants. I think that did a really great job of just giving you an idea of some of the amazing ways that this technology is being leveraged in market. What I thought was really interesting about that kind of showcase is it was really reflective of the Atlanta ecosystem as a whole. You had high tech with the contextual computing, you had marketing and advertising, B2B, B2C, and I think that shows that it's not a kind of singular industry type innovation economy, and one where all facets of the business economy is being tapped and leveraged by this technology, certainly here in Atlanta. So I thought it was nice to just kind of serve as another subtle reminder that this is not an industry agnostic AI technology and something that is prevalent everywhere. So with that, we're going to dive in a little deeper and jump right into our panelists. So panelists, come join me by turning your cameras on, and I will introduce you guys to our audience and get started. All right, great. So way we're going to get started today is, again, if you have questions as this keep coming through, throw that over and we'll bring that up during the Q&A portion. But I'm going to dive right in by introducing our panelists and then having, let me just make sure, and then have them kind of introduce themselves a little more by talking a little bit about how their business is currently leveraging and deploying AI. So we have Sean Flaherty, the Marketing Advanced Analytics and Market Insight at UPS, Joe Depa, MD, Applied Intelligence Lead at Accenture, Bob Toohey, President with Pymetrics, and Titania Jordan, the Chief Parent Officer with Bark. So we're really excited to hear from them. So let's start in that. Let's start with Titania. and then we'll work backwards. Tell us a little more about Bark and how your business is currently leveraging and deploying AI.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for everybody attending here. Bark is technology that keeps children safer online and in real life using artificial intelligence. And what that means is that, kids are on these things upwards of 8 hours a day. Not only these things, but gaming platforms, laptops, iPads, et cetera, especially in the age of distance learning. And there are some obvious things that parents can look for, but it's time consuming and it's cumbersome if they even know where to look. But children are smart and they're much more tech savvy than a lot of us parents. And they are communicating not only via text and email and social media, but there are Vault apps, there's DMs within TikTok and Instagram. There's all these things, good luck navigating Snapchat alone, right? And so what our artificial intelligence is doing is flagging the problems so that you don't have to do that digging and so that you don't have to have that friction with your child of, all right, give me your phone. It's time for, mom or dad to do the scan. So we're going to alert parents and caregivers to the biggest things that they would need to know about: cyberbullying, sexual content, thoughts of suicide and depression, potential drug use, online predators, acts of violence, and more. And it's not just the obvious keywords like sex, drugs. It's the way that children are actually speaking, and not only with words, but with emojis, with memes, with GIFs, with text overlay, audio, video. It's pretty incredible what we've built. There's nothing like it out there. There are a lot of options for parental controls when it comes to time and filter, but nothing that is actually flagging the most concerning things, giving it to parents and caregivers in the way that they can digest it, text or email, along with best recommended next steps for how to address it. Because I guarantee you, nothing prepares you for having the pornography conversation with your 9-year-old. So.
And I can't imagine how quickly that AI has to evolve when it feels like, hey, here's the new batch of emojis that can mean it looks like a fruit or a vegetable, but it's actually being used to speak in this kind of language. So your AI has to kind of understand all of the context that's baked into all these images.
That's right. Yeah, don't get me started on the eggplant emoji and the peach emoji and everything else.
Yeah, that's I'm sure the AI knows more how to speak to the emoji language than I do right now. So Sean, really appreciate you joining us and being a part of the panel. Tell us a little bit about how you and your division at UPS is currently leveraging and deploying AI.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you start talking about AI, there I think are kind of people who are, I think of them as strict constructionalists, and then there are people who talk about it in a more broad sense: AI, machine learning, data science, and advanced analytics. And at UPS, we kind of take that broad spectrum view. We sit on a massive amount of data at UPS related to all those millions of packages that e-commerce is driving through everybody, through our networks and through retail channels. And for us, one of my mentors used to say, knowledge without action is trivia, but data without insight is equally trivial. And so what we do is we use a variety of advanced analytics and AI techniques to try and turn that data into information that helps us optimize our network and improve the customer experience. The biggest example of that is something we talk about a lot, our Orion technology, which actually optimizes our driver routes on a daily basis. So a UPS driver stops about 120 times a day. And if you think about the number of permutations of that route with 120 different nodes on it, it's basically approaching infinity in terms of how many different possibilities there are. And what Orion does is it makes it so that we optimize that route to be as efficient and effective as possible. And over the last few years, Orion's actually taken over 100 million miles, on-road miles a year out, over 10 million gallons of gasoline. So it's not just more efficient, faster for our customers, better for us, but it's environmentally conscious. So we've taken over 100,000 tons a year of CO2 emissions out of our network, just using AI to kind of make the world a better place. And then that same data reservoir that Orion and some other things sit on that are very helpful for us in operating our network also enables some customer-facing technology. So if you're a UPS My Choice customer and you go into our website to track your package, there's a chat bot that pops up, and using that same kind of technology is able to tell you things about your package, but more importantly, let you manipulate that package so that if you wish for it to be delivered
to your home, or delay the delivery, or route it to an access point, or in some other way accelerate it, decelerate it. You have all those options, and it's all done without having to have interactions with another human being. And so that's just a couple of examples of how we're using advanced analytics technologies to try and sift through the data and provide a more efficient, more environmentally friendly, and more customer-focused experience.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm assuming Orion has its etymology starts at the cosmos, but as a Flanagan, as a Flaherty, I'd like to imagine it's just part of it's another Irish gentleman doing great work in AI.
It's a great hunter, yes.
Perfect. Joe, you're the applied intelligence lead with Accenture. Tell us a little more about how your firm is currently leveraging and deploying AI.
Yeah, thank you, Will, and thank you, Atlanta Inno, for hosting us today. And for those of you that don't know Accenture, we're a global professional services organization, and we work with about 87% of the Fortune 500 companies. Within Accenture, I lead what we call our applied intelligence team for our South Market unit. And we have about 400 data scientists, data consultants, and AI strategists. And we are focused on helping leverage AI and analytics to help our clients across industries become more data-driven. In terms of how our business is leveraging AI, I can tell you that the pandemic has really impacted and accelerated the adoption of AI solutions across all of our clients. I was thinking about this panel, and actually I lead an AI roundtable where we met a couple weeks ago with about 30 executives from Fortune 500 companies here in Atlanta. And in that session, one of the interesting remarks made by one of the chief analytics officers that stuck with me was, he said we were moving from month-long and year-long AI deployments to weekly or daily deployments. So that trend from months or years to weeks or days continues to accelerate in the AI space. And so Accenture is helping our clients enable AI adoption at scale. Just two examples of AI solutions that we're working on with a couple of companies right now that I think are interesting. First, this concept of demand sensing AI. And I can tell you that what has really become interesting for our clients is the ability to sense demand and then use AI to optimize how that demand is going to impact your supply chain. You heard Sean talk about that earlier with the UPS trucks, but also impact your marketing, impact your digital channels, impact ultimately your workforce and how you allocate your workforce. And so this is across industries, whether it's a consumer packaged goods client or a travel client that's been massively impacted. The key is how do you leverage new data sources to help predict where that demand is coming from, and then simulate with machine learning and analytics how that demand may impact your overall enterprise. So that's one example that I think many of our clients are working with. The second one that's my favorite is how do you take AI and do good with it? And so I love the bark example that was given earlier. And there's another one that I'm really passionate about, which is how do you leverage AI to create precision medicine and use clinical and genomic information to then target and personalized treatment for patients. And so we've always had tons and tons of data in the healthcare space. And now what we're seeing is the opportunity to stitch together that data set from pharmaceuticals. And this combination of precision medicine and assisted clinical treatment is something we think has great momentum in the market. And of course, I think we're all excited to see the impact there. Of course, the COVID vaccine is another example that I know we're all waiting on, where AI is at the forefront of that as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Will.
Thanks, Joe. And last but not least, wanted to kick it to Bob with Pymetrics. Last one, you'll get the same exact question, but tell me a little bit more about how Pymetrics is currently leveraging deploying AI.
Sure, thanks, and thanks for having us. It's great to be here. Pymetrics, basically, simply put, what we have done with AI is we're a talent matching platform, and our fundamental core belief is when companies and job seekers, we believe everyone has potential, and amazing things happen with companies when you tap everybody's potential. What I mean by that, as we look ahead, we're really putting the humans and centering our decision around the human behaviors, both social, emotional, and cognitive behaviors, about what makes fit, how somebody fits into a role. We kind of design those into what the best fit role is, help job seekers guide themselves into roles, or help employers make real better decisions with other data points they have about who's going to be that best fit in using AI. And what we do is we put folks through basically using a 25-minute gamification tool based on neuroscience games that will give people both the job seeker development and information about themselves, and then guide them to different jobs, and then employers information to help them match to better jobs. And what you really get out of that is is really tapping the potential and moving people and seeing both companies use us internally, where they're using us for internal mobility and mapping people around an organization and helping them see what skills they need to have and have learning pathways, and both externally as people are hiring. And so it's really one enabler, and I like to say it's a data set and making better decisions using data versus what traditionally happens today. A lot of people look at people's resumes and people's, like they say, IQ and what their past experiences were. It's really not a predictor of the future, and there's a lot of biases into that. So we really kind of bring a fair approach also into that opportunity for folks. So sure, we'll talk a little more about that, but it's really taking AI, and everybody's talking about different ways to use it in machines, but we're really kind of using it on the human side to make smarter decisions. And I think this panel is great. As I think about this, there's only an opportunity to do more. I think a lot of times everybody still thinks about AI as something bad, no matter where you use it, where it's really going to create more opportunities and I think better outcomes in everything everybody's talking about on this panel.
Yeah, and Bob, I did just want to stay with you for a little bit, because while Joe was chatting, it made me think, as he was talking about how the pandemic has really accelerated the need to deploy this, and maybe the ease in which someone would say, hey, let's start working this into our stack. I'm curious on the Pymetrics side, kind of helping enterprise companies build diverse teams, bias-free. The other big thing in our world right now outside of the pandemic is obviously all the discussion surrounding social justice. So I'm curious, as Joe was talking about how, this has been an incredibly busy 6 months because of this external force, has business at Pymetrics changed? Have you seen a more willingness to accept what Pymetrics is about during this macro discussion?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So first, at our core is we really look to, I would like to say, de-bias and put a fair process in place. That is at our core. So everything that's happened in the world is actually a headwind for us to say, okay, we have to think about things differently. And we're a technology and a tool. And when we talk to companies, to really help them with their efforts in diversity and what they're doing around expanding their workforce and really making a difference. And I like to say we're one tool. There's many tools out there. We're not the final solution, but certainly the conversation has changed as people think about things and where they're going and what they need to use and start to think differently. I think the pandemic and COVID has opened up the speed at which companies are starting to think about using technology and moving to a digital world. And at the same time, what are the outcomes they want to achieve in that? So what data are they using and are they getting the right outcomes? And in our process, we take a lot of pride and value in what we've done in really delivering what we call open AI, ethical principles around that. What we do is we're constantly learning to make sure that our AI and bias is fair, and we don't launch anything into the marketplace or into employers until we kind of have passed our own scrutiny and tests. We've had a lot of third-party audits to kind of verify that. So we put a lot of rigor around that and take a lot of pride in making sure that we just align and get the outcomes that people need. So in short, and to answer your first point, yes, there's more interest and ability, and I think willingness for people to say, I got to try something different because what I'm doing today is not working. So we know it's not working today. Technology isn't going to replace the human, but it's going to help them make better decisions. And I think that's how we have to kind of marry those two things.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And that leads me to one of my first questions is everything that was discussed, not just in that first answer, but also in the showcase, defining the power or promise of AI, it's impossible, because by design, it's going to mean something different to every industry, to every market, to every customer target demographic. So I guess to start, as you guys think about how you're leveraging technology and the promise of it, what is the promise? What does the promise of AI mean to you in Accenture? And we'll start with Joe.
You're absolutely right. So there's many definitions of AI and frankly the promise of AI, and none of them are wrong, right? For me, I think of AI as a tool to build a more flexible organization. So a tool to build a more flexible organization. It's an important tool. It's a massively powerful tool, especially as we think about how organizations need to be more flexible post-pandemic. But the power of AI can only be harnessed with the right people, the right data, the right culture in place. Last year, Accenture did an interview with 2,000 Fortune 500 executives across industries. And it was interesting to see the results of that in terms of how they were able to scale AI, or if they've had success with AI. And what we found was that 80% of executives said they have failed to scale AI solutions at their companies. 80%. I mean, that's significant. And what they're really saying is they've started to do some mini pilots, but they haven't been able to scale it. And so they haven't yet harnessed the true power of AI. Yet, 84% of those same executives believe that they have to achieve AI at scale to achieve their business objectives. So that means two things. It means AI is absolutely fundamental to most enterprises' futures. That ability to be flexible is something that I think all of our client conversations are centered around. Agility, being able to act with speed, being flexible, all those things that AI can enable. And then secondly, if 80% of clients across industries are saying they're struggling to move from pilot to scale, that struggle usually comes down to either not having the right data foundation in place or the right talent and culture in place to make sure AI is adopted across the organization.
Yeah, Bob, you're nodding along. I'm curious.
I agree with what Joe said. I'll throw one other thing in. I think it's back to what I said. You know, there's still this, oh my, we're using AI. Like no matter what it is, there's this initial reaction. It's just another compute power. It's the next evolution of where we're going. And I think if we almost accept and harness the power of it, the good that will come of it, I mean, we're just tipping the iceberg. I mean, everybody that kind of I'll use ourselves. We talk a lot about change management. So you go into a company and you ask people to take 25 minutes of a gamification tool, and their first reaction is, well, what's that going to get out of me? But then when they see the results of it and what happens after, that's where the change starts to happen. So getting people over the change, and you know, because I think when AI first came out, there was a lot of like fear of wrong things being done, no matter what industry you are. And I think we just have to kind of move everybody to that tilt. And I think that change management and understanding how people use it and some level of acceptance and really kind of harnessing that is where I think every company has an opportunity.
Definitely, and I wanted to kind of, with that, kind of kick it to Titania on the promise of AI. I think, you know, your customer base being parent, is that an easier sell? Is it a harder sell? Is it a different sell, or is it the same sell? How do you kind of package and articulate the promise of AI to your customers?
That is such a good question. And it's a loaded question. I'm going to try to be very succinct. And I'll start with an example. You know, you could talk to the average mom in middle America about AR, or you could throw out the example of, you know, when you're watching a football game and there's illustrations on top of the screen, and you just make it real. Give them real life examples, and you speak to them where they are, whether they need to absorb the content via video, via a blog post, via a social post, via a GIF. Just make it real for them. And the way that we make it real for parents is by showcasing the alerts. So you might not know, for example, how your antivirus software in your computer surfaces the threats, but you sure know when it's not working. And you appreciate those, just the exclamation mark of like, we caught this danger. Same thing with an alert. You might not know how our algorithm works and is scanning literally billions of data points across over 5 million children across the nation and over 2,300 school districts across the nation. But when you see an image of a Twitter direct message that a potential predator has sent a minor, you get it. You get it and you appreciate it. And on top of that, there's nothing stronger than word of mouth referrals, and our user base tells our story better than we could. We have a Facebook group of over 80,000 parents called Parenting in the Tech World, and they're constantly singing our praises, telling community what Bark has done for them, not how Bark did it, but what. And it gets to the why of help me parent in this digital age because it's overwhelming.
That's great. And then, Sean, I just wanted to kind of wrap with you with that same very question. I think you hit it a little bit as you were talking through all of the myriad of ways UPS is using it. But I guess at a 10,000 feet up, how do you define the power and promise of AI?
Yeah, you know, our customers don't necessarily need to know how the package got to their doorstep. But there is an expectation that that package will get to their doorstep. It will get there in an efficient way. It will get there in a timely fashion. And they expect us to solve that puzzle in the background. And when you have an event like the pandemic, where package volumes in the economy in general, surged between 40 and 60%. They expect companies like UPS and others to have the ability to use technology to pivot and to make our network run at peak efficiency in the springtime rather than just between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and really answer the call that was necessary to get all those packages delivered to people as more and more people were staying home. And so for us, it gives us the flexibility that Joe was kind of talking about, and the increased efficiency I alluded to earlier, to be able to make those things happen efficiently and deliver on our UPS promise, whether it's peak season in the traditional sense or it's some kind of artificial peak, that we're having to pivot and be flexible and creative with how we use information to help us accelerate.
That's great. And a lot of kind of what you guys are talking about is that, the end game of AI post deployment. So as I jump into some of my other questions, I'm seeing a lot of really great questions come in from the audience, and I want to get to those because I think, they're here to have their answers, have their questions answered. So with some of my following questions, I'll start point, and then we'll kind of get, rather than have everybody jump in, if after that first person, if you guys have anything to add, please jump in and I'll move through so we can get to the audience questions, which are really great. Keep them coming, please. But post that kind of, hey, here's where it ends, I did kind of want to go back with Bob in thinking and knowing the countless, probably endless applications for AI. How at the very beginning, how do you focus on where to begin integration wise? How do you define what's possible? In other words, you could apply AI to revenue growth, supply chain, customer engagement, human resources. How do you know where to start with the technology to get buy-in that will lead to the end game?
In any organization, that's more of a broader question, not because obviously I'm biased. Start with the humans and Pymetrics, because then you'd be, but I think I think it's kind of similar to what Joe said. What are you trying to solve first? So where are your pain points? What are you trying to solve? And then where can you leverage technology? So, some companies have revenue shortfalls. And so is it a revenue problem? So is my revenue problem a result of not having the right talent, not having the right product, not having the right distribution channel, a poor customer experience? All of those things will come to play. And I think then you got to just step back and say, what technologies and where can I solve? And I'll hone in. And on the people side, I always often say, if we have the people part right in any company, a lot of great things happen. You're building your culture, your organization's working. But many of the examples that everybody brought up here, there's other applications to that. As Sean talks about what's happening behind the scenes of getting a package in UPS, AI is being used to solve that problem. That's something they have to use every day. So I think it comes down to what pain point are you trying to solve in that company, and make sure that AI technology you're using is delivering value to that business problem you're trying to solve, and connect those two.
Yeah, and Joe, to that point, is there something where, is there a problem that's out there that you don't think AI, it's not something in which, hey, here's a business problem that AI might not have a way into, or does AI have a way into every problem? It's just a matter of finding.
Yeah, I think, Will, for any of our clients, regardless of the industry, it's important to first level set on what do they mean by AI, right? So as mentioned here, there's some hype that happened over the last few years where AI is sort of seen as this cure-all for any challenge, and it can just solve world hunger, right? And I think as mentioned, the key with AI is it's one piece of the toolkit, and it's not a magic potion if you don't have the right people to process the culture that's wrapped around it. So what we often say is, before you even get started with anything with AI, you have to first define the business problem you're trying to solve for. So in the majority of cases, you don't need AI at all. I've been to some clients and I've told them there's absolutely nothing wrong with using Excel. If it's solving a business problem, consider it a great tool, right? It's fundamental that you make sure that you're trying to solve a problem. And then secondly, if you figured out the problem that you're trying to solve for, now you got to make sure that you got the data to go solve it with AI. And so the data foundation is the next piece. So how do you get the right data in place? If you don't have the data, how do you have the plan to get the data? Lots of interesting third-party data that's out there now. And so some of our clients are used to having to build a bunch of internal data sources that frankly have been ineffective and inefficient. And you can leverage different data sources now today that you couldn't leverage 6 months ago. And then lastly, once you've got the business problem figured out and you've got the data foundation roadmap figured out, then you can say, okay, do I have the right team? Do I have the right culture in place to make use of that data? And so I've seen some fantastic AI solutions for our clients that are predicting events with really good accuracy. And then the problem has been that even if the recommendation is really good, if the organization is not adopting that into practice, frankly, it's not relevant. And so we see a lot of that. And I think it's really important that people understand right people, right culture is probably the most critical elements to seeing successful AI adoption.
Yeah, your Excel anecdote reminded we were doing a panel not too long ago on just fundraising, and had a few venture capitalists on the panel, and they were kind of talking about the same thing. Is they have so many conversations about founders coming to them, hey, how do we raise VC? How do we raise VC? And their comment was, hey, a bank loan's not a bad path to go down sometimes. And that kind of anecdote just triggered that memory for me. But one of the things that have kind of come up in nearly every answer is the human component. So I did that's kind of a natural trend to basically one of the biggest trends in AI, which is responsible AI, and how you're making sure that the artificial intelligence that you're developing or deploying is human. So let's start with Sean. Let's start with you. How is that? Is that a daily conversation, a weekly conversation? How do you make sure that the AI you're building is as human as possible?
Yeah, particularly at point of contact with customers or consumers, the people who are receiving packages. And I talked about the chatbot that we have. I think we're always trying to find better ways to serve those customers, to serve up that experience in a way that makes it more user friendly and frankly easier. But you have to do that in a way that's not disconcerting to the customer. If it becomes creepy, that's a real problem. We might have the ability using AI to tell somebody proactively, send them an email that says, hey, we see you're not home on Tuesday afternoons. Would you like us to delay that package a day? But think about how disturbing that email would be to receive, right? And so it's just like the Facebook analogy as well. Like you talk to your spouse about a trip you want to go on, and the next thing you know, 5 minutes later, Facebook's serving you ads about where to stay. And so I think we have to develop very easy to use interfaces, but to be mindful of the uncanny valley, right? When we know it's a chat bot and we're interacting with it, we have certain expectations and certain tolerances for what its limitations are. As it starts to move into a place where you're not sure, there's kind of this emotional pushback, and then when it becomes indistinguishable from a human, obviously there's a whole another set of issues. But I think most companies are figuring out or trying to figure out how to make it as easy to use as possible. And that usually means making it as human as possible. And I echo Bob. I think there's way too many people worried that AI means Skynet and the Terminator, and that's not what it means, right? It's about making. I think, I'm not sure if it was Joe or Bob who made the point to start with. It's about, I think it was Joe, putting tools in the hands of humans and human-centered design to make them able to make more powerful, more effective decisions, whether it's how I want to receive a package or how we route a driver or any of the things that how we hire people, how we manage change, how we keep track of our children. I think that's really the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and taking the children component and bringing that same question to Titania, as you, I mean, your AI has to be human because it's dealing in this very sensitive space. Is that something that, as you think about building your technology and trying to do the best job as humanly possible, how is your development team and the brand as a whole kind of looking at the technology and ensuring that yes, we need this tech to catch everything it can, but it still needs to have that critical human component?
Yeah, that's a core piece of our messaging, in that Bark is not a replacement for effective and engaged parenting. It is a tool, much like a bicycle helmet and sunscreen and fire alarms are all tools that you use to help keep your children safer. Bark is that element for their digital lives. So we're very clear and candid about the fact that you can't replace that type of parenting. You have to continue to talk to your children about these issues. On top of that, you can't just set it and forget it. The AI would not be able to become smarter and better without training and guidance. And so we utilize our family, our Bark family, our customers, to help. So for example, if we send a violence alert for a weapon, but turns out it's just a picture of a gun from Fortnite, we ask, was this helpful? And if you toggle no, we can learn quickly, okay, that's actually not a threat, etc. So, having the human element to cover some of the hardest issues you'll ever encounter as a parent is critical. And also back to what many on the panel have said just about the team, right? We're not in the business of collecting data to sell or to get you to be more engaged and more addicted into a product. We're here to surface problems that already exist in the tech that your children are using and help you navigate that. And that's what lives at the core of what we're doing.
And now I want to say I think everyone's kind of returned it to the team component. So that kind of brings me to another big piece of this. And certainly as we think about building this technology in Atlanta, a big piece of the team is the team that's developing this technology. So I'm curious and would love to kind of start with anybody who has a thought on this, but how has it been hiring for this Endeavor technology? This is a little more difficult than hey, we need to scale this division, and we know that because we're in this market, there's we have direct access to hundreds of thousands of brand marketers. It's a little bit difficult to hire to scale your AI division. So how has it been hiring for this? And do you see a skills gap that needs addressing that's only going to help kind of scale AI for your business if we scale the folks who can develop it?
I'll jump in. I mean, there's no question that we have more data right now than we have people or systems that are able to analyze it. And when I say we, I mean us as a society. More data than we have people who are able to analyze and interpret it, even with the assistance of AI and machine learning. And so I think that if you look just what the local Atlanta universities have done, both Emory and Georgia Tech have added decision science, master's and PhD level programs in the last 5 years. Honestly, I've got high school children, and if they're looking for, how do I do well in a career, I'm going to say, this is a road that it's like being in computer programming in the 1960s or 1970s, right? It's just going to explode. Everybody's going to be a technologist of some kind, right? Back then, it's just a different, to Bob's point, it's just a different kind of technology. It's just the next evolution. So there's a little bit of a scarcity now, I think, from what I have seen. But I think there is a market move to try and fill that as well.
I would agree with what Sean said. Well said. It sums it up.
The only thing I would add is, in addition to Georgia Tech and Emory, which I'm a Georgia Tech alum, so great engineering program there, great master's of analytics program there as well. But I think one of the more interesting college universities that we have here is the HSBUs. And so I was actually on the phone with Dr. Washington and Todd Green yesterday, who lead Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, and Spelman as part of the Atlanta University Center. And they just launched a data science initiative for undergraduate and graduate degrees in data science. And so I love the idea of Atlanta being a population of diverse talent too, especially in data science. I think that's something that is going to help propel Atlanta onto the sort of data science hub, especially when it comes to enterprise. That diverse talent is something that I think everybody's looking to gain access to.
Absolutely. And I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so I'm going to jump into some of these questions. And Joe, I wanted to stay with you for the first one, which I think harkens back to one of your first points. And it's from Olivia from Kleinhans. If you had to guess, how many of the 80% of CEOs that are blocked in scaling AI are blocked due to the lack of a solid data foundation?
It's interesting. The data foundation, I think, is probably listed as the most critical priority for those CEOs. And so this idea of a data foundation, sort of garbage in, garbage out, we often tell our clients, if you've got data but it's not very good and you're using it to make decisions, that's actually just as bad as if you're not having the data at all. So how do you get the right data foundation in place? How do you make sure that it's got the ethical, responsible AI components, so there's not data bias in it? That's something we take very, very seriously. Those two pieces are really fundamental. And then what we're seeing a trend towards, which we really like when it comes to data foundation, is what we call data democratization. So then once you have that data and it's secure data and it's trusted data, how do you open it up for your business users versus just your data science teams? So the business users can actually access that data in a way and then make meaningful actions on it. So absolutely, that's a critical priority for any CEO or client that we talk to.
Great, and I did just want to bring in more of a great comment, Tony, is Cynthia says, great point on the HBCUs. Kennesaw also has a terrific data science school, so
Absolutely.
wanted to voice that. And another question that came in that we've kind of hit around, but does a very good job of making this thing, seems that every software technology company is putting AI or machine learning in every piece of marketing material to sell their products. Are these terms in danger of overuse and losing their value?
I would say yes.
Yeah,
it's like the cloud 10 years ago. Everything was the cloud, and now AI has taken over. It's the next. I think Sean's points earlier. I mean, and everybody here has made that point, but it definitely is just this broad term, and then everybody, back to the earlier point, gets nervous. And what is it? And when you unpack it, it's data analytics and learning based on smart data, and the earlier and everybody's kind of examples of continuous learning and how do you use that data. But I think, Sean, you were going to add to that.
No, I was just watching the heads nod, and it looked like 4 yeses. So
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, kind of to that question, we are in danger of overuse. So part of it is just continuing, is just waiting for the consumer domain knowledge to catch up and understand how it's being used, or is it on us to do a better job on educating? How do you, I guess, I feel like, to your cloud point, yes, it was like the cloud 10 years ago, but we just had Snowflake have the highest software IPO ever today. It kind of had its overuse moment and then people got over it. Do we need to do anything differently in how we package market it, or are people just going to get over it?
I think it'll be a learning. I think Titania she gave examples earlier that were perfect to that. Just show people what it's doing, and then they start to realize, and as you show people, then they harness the power of it. And I think as people realize, oh, that's AI, oh, that's machine learning, it just will start to adopt itself. And I would add, I do think, as much as what's going on in the world with the pandemic, I think one piece of silver lining that will come out of it, I think there's more openness to learn, both as consumers, both as households, both as companies, to kind of move forward with technology. So I think we've hit a time that I think we're going to accelerate this very quickly. And just as people see how things become easier and better, they'll adapt to it.
Yeah,
Another quick comment I wanted. Oh, sorry.
Oh, just real quick, I was going to say it starts with education at the youngest levels too. In kindergarten, much like we're teaching kids how to code in very simple ways, if we can help implement the building blocks of AI into their curriculum, they take that home, they show parents get more familiar with it. And Bob, as you said, just emphasizing more of the what can this do for me and what's in it for me versus how does it work will help it be easier implemented.
Definitely. Another quick comment stemming from Joe, one of your earlier points. GSU has a top 10 master's and undergraduate program in information systems and data science with an AI focus. So thanks to everyone for adding some more context around the talent that's in Atlanta. Something that we try to focus on a lot at Atlanta Inno is not just AI, but AI in Atlanta. Everything, we're a local media company. We're in 14 markets. Everything is local first. So it's important for us not just to talk about this technology, but how Atlanta is uniquely positioned to build a hub and a support system around it. One question I thought was interesting that I want to hit on that I know is reflective of our audience and a lot of folks that are on the call is, one way is you build this technology in-house. But if you're an early stage company or even a division that doesn't have access to those immediate product resources, are there some AI tools that a company can leverage to start building its AI solution? Have you guys had any experience leveraging any third-party platforms to kind of onboard into this? Which I think speaks to, you know, how complicated the tech is. I know we've covered a handful where it's trying to make, I mean, obviously on our showcase, we had the e-commerce company that's trying to, hey, here's your plugin to bring AI from a chatbot. So you're starting to see more of that. So to answer that question, I would look into Toucan AI. I know that what they are doing is kind of similar. But I have your name, and I'll kind of throw that out to our network of writers across, you know, to see what we have. Before I wrap with our last question, I did want to kind of open it up to the panel. I know, you know, as we are kind of going back and forth, so much of what we want to do is have this kind of free-flowing conversation where we can lead into the top. Is there anything, as we think about this big, broad topic of the state of innovation in AI, is there anything that you want to make sure that, hey, I have 20 more seconds. I want to make sure the audience comes away with this insight. Let's start with Joe, and we'll go clockwise.
No, I just wanted to thank you, Will, and thank Atlanta Inno for having us today. I mean, the future in Atlanta is really all of ours in many ways, right? We've got all the tools here. We've got a great startup community. We've got great corporations. We have great educational institutions with diverse and very world-renowned talent. And so let's leverage AI to help innovate and help make Atlanta a better place. So I appreciate everybody joining today for sure.
Cool. Titania?
Yeah, I think posing it as if you could do anything, if you could replicate yourself, what would you do? Just posing it as a very simple question. And then you realize, wow, there's a lot of things that can be done at scale using this thing called AI. So start with it. If you could do anything, what would you do? And then explore how that can actually be possible thanks to technology.
That's great. Sean?
Yeah, I want to echo Joe's thanks to the organizations for bringing us together today. I think it's been a fascinating conversation. I think the one thing I would want people to come away with is that AI is not a fad. It's not this buzzword thing. It's just the way we're going to consume the vast quantities of data that we haven't been able to swallow up until now and use them in productive ways rather than just having, you know, petabytes of information sitting in a closet somewhere. It's going to drive our society and our businesses forward. And to Titania's point, I'm sorry. It's about using it to make our society better and solving problems that previously maybe couldn't be solved. So thanks again.
And I'd say thanks, and I would just leverage off that and just say, let's continue learning and making things better, whether it's your home life, your work, your personal life. There's so much that we could do with this. And I think if we're open to that and keep learning, it's only going to get better.
That's great. And I wanted to invite our showcase participants back on. I do have a question for ViZZ and Pymetrics. So if you guys are still on and can turn your cameras on. All right, Mitch, we'll start with you. So the first question is, can you talk a little more about the digital twin and how it works with AI?
Yeah, so the digital twin is basically anything. So one of the things our software does is I tell people it will visualize anything, thought, not just buildings, and which confuses people. They're like, how can you visualize thought? Well, if you haven't built a building yet, but you have an idea in your head, you can visualize that. And the truth is all of our thoughts we think visually. So to be able to do that and immerse yourself in that process and using AI, it actually allows your computer to be subservient to us instead of us to the computer. It learns how we operate instead of us having to learn how it operates. So my version of ViZZ, for instance, would be completely different than your version of ViZZ. And over time, they would become more and more different in the way they operate, but the data that it presents would be very unique to us in the way it presents it. And so a digital twin is taking anything in the real world or anything even outside of the real world and putting it into a computer in a way that we can interact with it and gain value from it. So it can be a game, it can be replication of a building, the business, the processes, the things we do on a daily basis, and it's just applying the AI intelligence to that and deep analytics in it so that it gets a better understanding and use for us. So it's harder to explain than it is to experience, which is pretty typical of AI, frankly.
And then with the showcase folks and everyone, we're just going to end with this one. And if anybody has I think this is a great kind of last swing at the plate. This is from Matthew Munns. What AI innovation do you see being most impactful over the next few years? I'll kind of open that up to everyone as our last question.
Everybody is far too quiet. How about AI continuing to more humanize us, to reach us personally, and to be used at deeper levels in our lives in ways we don't see, that it improves the quality of our life? You know, kind of bridging the barrier between work and home and our communities so that we become more involved with each other, even if we're not physically together. That's why I love your product, Titania, and all these products. They contribute.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing to think about what could be. Obviously, what's top of my mind now, in addition to Bark, is just disease detection. That would have been really cool to have 6 months ago.
Yeah, and I think the best way to answer that, what do you see the most being impactful? I think a key takeaway from everything that you guys have been talking about is that data is embedded in everything, and using it to develop and iterate a solution is there. So think about what's going on with the fires in the Pacific Northwest, what's going on with the pandemic. Like, what AI innovation do you see being most impactful? It's going to be whatever is the biggest problem. That to me is we don't know what's going to be most impactful because we don't know the biggest problem in the next 2 years. But if it's whatever the biggest problem is, that's the potential of AI, is to be the bones and infrastructure of that solution. So with that, we're going to have a recap on the site. I wanted to thank our showcase, our panelists, everybody who engaged in the conversation. We like to start conversations and continue them. So please, if I didn't get to your question, if you have another question, email us. We're going to get on these answers and open them up to the Inno network as well, so we can facilitate them. If you come up with a question in a day, a week, a month, reach out to us at atlantainfo@americaninno.com. Follow us on the beat. You can reply right there. It heads right to us. So we really appreciate everybody tuning in and listening, sending in your questions. Keep them coming. We look forward to keep facilitating and telling these terrific stories. With that, I wanted to thank all of the panelists, all of the showcase participants. You can learn more about them in that recap post tomorrow. And lastly, a big final thank you to our sponsor, Accenture. Check them out in all the ways that they're supporting the Atlanta innovation economy. Thanks again, everybody. And we'll have this webinar as a video. If you just want to watch it over and over again, we'll have it as part of that recap. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.